Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Gabriella Gallagher, the National Chair of Canadian Friends of Peace Now. Welcome to our webinar today with Shlomo Ben-Ami. Our organization is the Canadian partner to Peace Now, Shalom Achshav, which is Israel's leading peace movement and which promotes the two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. You can find out more about us at our website at peacenowcanada.org. We really hope you will consider supporting us with a donation, which you can do via our website. Just go to the donate page. We rely entirely on donations from people like you. Our webinar today will run for 75 minutes, so until 1:15 Eastern Time. The last 30 minutes is reserved for audience questions. Please type your questions at any time using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please make your question as concise as you can. Our webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website. For this webinar, we are offering French translation captions. To view the translation, please click the captions option on the bottom of your Zoom screen and enable the translation toggle and select your language of choice. If you have a problem, put your question in the Q&As and our administrator will try to help you. We are honored to have as our guest today Shlomo Ben-Ami, a former Israeli foreign minister and diplomat and a very esteemed historian. Mr. Ben-Ami served as Israel's chief negotiator during the Camp David and Taba summits in the years 2000 and 2001. He has written a number of influential books, including his latest, Prophets Without Honor, the 2000 Camp David Summit and the End of the Two-State Solution. He is currently the Vice President of the Toledo International Center for Peace. Mr. Ben-Ami has generously agreed to stay with us until 15 minutes past the hour, and as I said, we are extremely honored to have him with us. Our moderator today is our Montreal board member, David Cohen. So David, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Gabriella. Welcome to our webinar, Shlomo Ben-Ami. I am, as someone like you who was born in Morocco, pleased to meet again, even though our first encounter lasted a few minutes at the University of Montreal, where you gave a conference in 2022. So let's start with the first question. Why did the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations in the past fail, especially the 2000 Camp David negotiations? You have explained that in detail in your book, Prophets Without Honor, published in 2022. Please go ahead.
Well, I can try and distill the essence of the reasons why the process has failed. And I would divide them in two parts. One is, I would say, tactical issues. There are always tactics at play in peace negotiations. And the second is more structural reasons that have to do with the narrative, with the clash of narratives that are impeding a peace agreement. But as far as the tactics are concerned, I should say that those who came to negotiate a final settlement with the Palestinians were defeated by the concept of interim agreements, such as Oslo, for example, that was based on what Henry Kissinger used to call constructive ambiguity. Constructive ambiguity is fine when you negotiate an interim settlement, but it becomes a minefield when you get to the final negotiations. So the constructive ambiguity of Oslo said, yes, at some point we will negotiate statehood, we will negotiate settlements, we will negotiate final borders, we will negotiate refugees, we will negotiate Jerusalem. But then we believed, those who came to negotiate the final settlement, that this meant that these were open-ended negotiations, whereas the Palestinians thought these were given. The result was given. We believed it was not given. We were just being asked to negotiate an issue, but we did not inherit from Oslo a clear idea as to the final settlement. So this was one major reason for the failure. We came to negotiate a final settlement on the basis that what was at stake were issues that were created by the 1967 war, whereas the Palestinians came to negotiate the issues of 1948, the issues of the Nakba, the issues of displacement, disinheritance, and religious issues. So this was like trying to break the genetic code of a conflict that had in it issues of real estate, that is borders, and issues of or non-tangible issues. And it turns out that non-tangible issues are always much more difficult to resolve than tangible issues. We could have a peace settlement with Egypt because this was only about real estate. It was just about Egypt getting back its land. And that was the recipe or the formula for a peace agreement. Whereas in the case of Palestine, it's not about land for peace. It's land and additional categories, such as, for example, millennial certificates of ownership, for example, issues that come from religion and history. For the Palestinians, it was about granting moral legitimacy to a state that, according to them, was born in sin. So that these were all issues that you didn't have when you negotiated with Syria or Jordan or Egypt. But with the Palestinian national movement, these were issues that prevented an agreement. The point of equilibrium where Israeli positions and Palestinian positions could meet was never really achieved. And then you can say that there were also tactical reasons. We didn't put on the table our red lines to the mediator, for example, to the Americans, to say, listen, these are real red lines. But when you start offering the Palestinians 66% of the land, which is what Prime Minister Barak did, and then you end up offering 92% at Camp David and 97% through the Clinton parameters, so nobody really trusts your negotiating positions. So tactically, there were mistakes. But my sense is that tactical issues, however important they may be, were not the reason for the failure. The reason for the failure was in the clash of narratives, on the way that Israelis perceived the agreement as being something that we as Israelis and Jews could live with. And the Palestinians saw these positions as unacceptable to them. You know, if you get take for example the issue of Temple Mount. That's amazing to try and convey, you know, to people that were proficient in peace negotiations. What did it mean to negotiate Temple Mount? This is something nobody ever in any kind of process negotiated. You start, it becomes a seminar in archaeology and history where your interlocutor refuses to admit that, that there has ever been such a thing as a temple in the Mount, even though the Quran itself acknowledges it. And then the Americans obviously accepted as Christians, whereas Palestinians would not accept it. And we needed to concede something which in Jewish history was very central. So these kind of issues, we couldn't really find the middle way. And there, in fact, the concept of middle way was utterly unacceptable by the Palestinians. They didn't believe that we needed to look for a compromise. The solution is borders of 67, removal of settlements. If you want blocks of settlements to accommodate your settlers, these would be ridiculous thin lines that would not be defensible. I mean, you could not really defend them in times of crisis, and therefore this is the mixture of things: the tactics, Palestinian tactics, Israeli tactics, American anemic leadership. You know, Clinton was a brilliant individual, but he lacked the bulldog character of Jimmy Carter in Camp David I. He was too nice a man that that didn't twist arms. And in these kind of processes, the superpower trying to mediate an agreement between two tribes, two Middle Eastern tribes, needs to be able to exert its capacity as a superpower. And we couldn't see that in America's, in US mediation at the time.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's talk about a non-tangible issue. The colonial settler analysis of the Israel-Palestine conflict is very fashionable in the West and among students in particular. While you expressed empathy for the Palestinian perspective in your book, you also criticized the settler colonial analysis of the conflict. What is your concern?
You know, Noam Chomsky, who is probably the critic in chief of Israel's immoral behavior, he himself rejected the number of times the comparison with Algeria and Vietnam. The Jews who came to Palestine were not the envoys of any power, of any European power. They did not came to create a bridgehead for the economic penetration of a European power, or a strategic penetration of a European power. They were idealists that came to create a state and a nation. So to compare this to European colonialism is absurd. You know, I don't know in the history of modern colonialism or in modern wars against colonialism, a war that persisted for more than 100 years. You know, keeping an empire is never so vitally important to the imperial power that it would risk the kind of international opprobrium and one war after another that was presumably fought for the sake of Palestine by the Arab neighbors. So there is no parallel to such a 100-year resistance against colonialism. If it were true colonialism, Israel would have long ago collapsed under the pressure of international opinion and one intifada after another. This is a refuge. These are the trenches of our existence. This is not colonialism. This is where the Jews have decided to create a homeland. And unlike the Australians or the New Zealandians or the Canadians, with due respect, we came to a place where we did have a history. We didn't come to a wasteland and eliminated an indigenous population as was done in North America. And this is my message to Miss Naomi Klein. Naomi Klein? Is it Naomi Klein? Yes, Naomi Klein, that the other day said what we need now is an exit from Zionism. And thou shall not kill, thou shall not, etc. So, you know, she lives between the United States and Canada, two countries that can tell us, we, the Israelis, a lesson about the annihilation of an indigenous population. So I think that the realities are so opposed, so different, that it's, you know, interestingly, the demonstrations that you see now throughout the West, in campuses and civil organizations or all kind of NGOs, none of it is in Africa or in Asia. I mean, that one would suppose that this would happen there. They were the victims of colonialism. They were the brothers of the Palestinians and of the enslaved Palestinians, as it were. So I see this more as an internal issue, as the kind of alienation that younger generations and the intellectual class has always had against their own country. In the 1960s or 1970s, it was Paul Hollander wrote an excellent book, Political Pilgrims, and they tried to explain how come Western intellectuals and academics found a model in Cuba, Algeria, Vietnam, the Soviet Union. We explained it the same way that I would explain what is going on now. It's an alienation with your own country. What Americans do to blacks, to faraway lands, be it Vietnam, be it Afghanistan, be it Iraq. And of course, there is a lot of, frankly, there is a lot of ignorance, of knowing the complexities of the conflict. This is not a clear-cut colonial problem. I would not deny that Israel's practices in the West Bank, are of a colonial nature. And this is why persons like me and others, we have dedicated our political life or political intellectual life to a separation between the two, between the State of Israel and the West Bank. But even so, even assuming even assuming that the West Bank is a colony, and accepting the paradigm that people like Rashid Khalidi and others have advanced with regard to the West Bank. Not only this is a historic land, a historic homeland of the Jewish people, but let's not assume that even so, this is a colony. But it is a colony that is territorially contiguous to the homeland, which means that every peace process that you conduct between Israel and that colony, with or without quotation marks, will have to deal with questions of political stability, of security. It's not like France leaves Algeria. When France leaves Algeria, that's the end of the conflict for France. France was not affected by the fact that Algeria was never became a stable democracy. And it went from one civil war to another. And after 30 years of FLN government, there was not enough couscous for everybody. So this did not affect France. If we withdraw from the West Bank, and the West Bank becomes something like Gaza after Israel's withdrawal, this will affect our security. You know, Albert Memmi was a French author, French, Tunisian author, who wrote 2 books on colonialism. About the colonizer and the colonized. That was his first book, where he called for the independence of third world country, you know, along the Fanon concept of liberation of the colonies. And in his second book, The Decolonizer and the Decolonized, the book was a lament about what happened in the decolonized countries, Algeria and others. So we need to be aware that we have a problem here. We have a problem that, by the way, even Edward Said, more than once, said, I am afraid that what we will see in Palestine is something like Libya with Gaddafi. So this is a major difference between a colony, supposing we will admit the paradigm of colonialism in the West Bank, which I do not deny that there are practices of colonialism, but there is a difference. We need to be very careful what happens there. And then, can anybody in the international community give Israel guarantees that what would happen in the state of Palestine would not be something similar to what we see throughout the Arab geography, be it Algeria, Libya, Yemen? Do we have any guarantees? We saw an independent state in Gaza, and this is the result. So that's a sea difference. There's a major difference between Israel, West Bank reality, and France, Algeria, America, Vietnam, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you. Because we have many other questions. Okay, and okay, in your book, you bid farewell to the two-state solution, and you wrote, whatever happens in the future is not going to be the classic two-state solution. It would be a situation born out of the chaos or a strategic earthquake from which a solution might emerge. Would you say that Israel and the Palestinians are facing such a strategic earthquake now?
Yes, they are facing. The only problem with the Israel-Palestine situation is that until the present, the parties were willing to sustain the difficulties of the conflict and not sacrifice what they believed are their vital interests. Normally, everything that happened good in the Middle East came after a war. The 1948 war, we got the armistice agreements. The Yom Kippur War, we got the peace with Egypt, etc. The problem is that here the parties, the insistence of the parties on defending every single issue that touches upon their history and their narrative is such that they are willing to sustain the sacrifices of war and not concede what they believe are issues where they simply cannot withdraw from them. They need to defend them to the bitter end. So this is why, in my book and in this conversation, I would maintain the position that I have developed in this book and in many other occasions before that. I came to the sad conclusion, that the two-state solution, being perhaps the most daunting divorce in history and the history of conflicts, may not be possible. At the end of the day, the parties will come, if they negotiate, they will turn the ocean that separates them into a river, but they would not be able to cross the river. And this would force the Israelis, this would be the major strategic shakeup. It will force the Israelis at some point to conduct a unilateral withdrawal from much of the West Bank. Because the dilemma is that if we do not reach a two-state solution, which is the ideal solution, which is the salvation for the Zionist project, and I believe also of the Palestinian project. If we fail there, and to me, success is almost impossible given the players and given the issues at stake, we might have to conduct a unilateral withdrawal. When Ariel Sharon withdrew from Gaza, he wanted to withdraw from the West Bank as well. He had the idea of dismantling 17 settlements from Samaria, and he eventually only dismantled 4 settlements. The Americans told him that they were afraid that the Palestinians won't be able to manage the land that Israel would withdraw from. So I think that at some point, if we want to protect the Jewish state and prevent our slide into a South African situation, which doesn't have a South African solution, because if we integrate the territories into the state of Israel and blur, delete, erase the green line, what we would have is a South African situation that does not lend itself to a South African solution. It would be a civil war, a permanent state of civil war. To prevent that, we would conduct at some point a unilateral withdrawal, which means converging much of the settlements into blocks adjacent to the Green Line. This would be such a major earthquake that would force the Jordanians to want to be more involved in the running of the West Bank. Just as the Egyptians, after our unilateral withdrawal from Gaza, were drawn into the business of Gaza out of an instinct of self-preservation for their security. In the year 2008, I was on a visit to Cairo, and I met Egypt's Minister of Intelligence, Omar Suleiman. And I told him how happy Israelis were that Egypt is again being interested in what is going on in Gaza and mediating agreements, contributing to the stability of the Strip. His answer to me was, what do you expect us to do? Gaza is Iran's common border with Egypt. So out of an instinct of self-preservation, I believe that the Jordanians, sooner or later, would have, once Israel, if we do not reach the two-state solution, which in my view is the ideal solution, then we will have to preserve the Jewish state, which is the whole essence of Zionism. A Jewish state with a sizable Arab minority. Today, the Arab minority in Israel is 21%. In 1948, it was 11%. So much for genocide. And the same can be said about Palestinian population, a population of a million and something, perhaps 1.5 million, if we exaggerate, is now 13 million worldwide and 7 million in Palestine. So it's about 9 times more than then. So much for genocide. So I think that the misunderstanding of the complexities of this conflict among pundits in the West, or the leaders of opinion and young men that are demonstrating against the scenes of Zionism, I think that would be very, very important to try and convey the truth, this simple truth that Oscar Wilde once inserted into one of his aphorisms, that the nuance is what is the distance between civilization and barbarity. You need to be capable of seeing the complexity of a problem. And I'm afraid that many of Israel's critics do not see the complexity of the problem. To sum up, the two-state solution is the ideal solution. I have many, many doubts if this is feasible. Israel would have at some point to withdraw from the bulk of the land. This might lead to a civil war inside Israel if Israel has to dismantle the more ideologically driven settlements in the heartland of Judea and Samaria. This might mean civil strife, or perhaps civil war, but this will be our ultimate defense and protection of the core of Zionism. And the core was about the creation of a Jewish state with a sizable Arab minority living in equal terms according to the law and to reality as well.
Thanks. Thank you. What is your view of President Biden's roadmap for ending the Gaza war, which is widely supported by key European and Arab states? And Biden pretends his current proposals reflect Israel's position. Is it true?
I think yes. I think that this is a plan that now the Israeli side has accepted, in fact, and Netanyahu, as always, tries to go the line of yes, accepting, but then having a discourse to his political base that doesn't concur exactly with the parameters of the plan. But essentially, I think yes. Israel has accepted a plan in stages of scaling down the war, withdrawing from cities, from the main strongholds that she has occupied during the war, and have a return of what remains of the hostages. And then move gradually to a regional normalization of between Israel and the Arab countries. What brought Netanyahu to accept the deal is, in my view, the fact that at long last, the Americans understood that the Biden vision at the beginning had the creation of a Palestinian state at the end of the road. And I thought that it was tactically wrong because it allowed Netanyahu to mobilize opinion in Israel against the plan. Now that they have discarded the question of Palestine, not that they have abandoned it as a long-term strategy, but it doesn't form part of the proposal right now. The proposal right now is about ending the war in Gaza, and I think it is wise, and this is why Netanyahu and his war cabinet accepted it.
I think they have converging views on weakening or disbanding or eliminating Hamas militarily and its governance capacity of Gaza. Do you think they agree on that, Biden and Netanyahu?
See, there is a contradiction in the position of the international community on Gaza. On the one hand, everybody says Gaza should be ruled by the Palestinian Authority without a Hamas component. Hamas is not a partner to any political solution. This is the common wisdom throughout Europe and the United States. But then how does this square with calling Israel to stop the war? Because Hamas is still there, Hamas is going nowhere. And therefore, the assumption that you can have a post-war reality in Gaza without Hamas being part of it, or even the two-state solution without Hamas being part of it is impossible. I mean, it's not realistic. Hamas is today the most dynamic and popular component of Palestinian nationalism. They brought the question of Palestine. They drew it from oblivion and put it at the center of international agenda. They have sustained an 8-month war, and they possibly can sustain a longer war. So now they suddenly are going to evaporate. Hamas is going nowhere, and this will condition any concept of post-war government that doesn't include Hamas. So this is the contradiction in the position of the international community. And if you want to negotiate a final settlement, two-state solution, for example, Hamas will be part of the PLO. Now that there are ongoing negotiations between the PLO and Hamas about a merger. To Hamas, this will not be a merger. This will be a takeover. They are stronger and they have the support of the population, both in Gaza and, well, in Gaza, I don't know, but in the West Bank, certainly. So let us go step by step. Right now, the most urgent thing is to stop the war in Gaza, because maybe Israel would have to shift to the north. We have a very serious problem in Lebanon with Hezbollah, and I would not entirely discard the possibility of an all-out war with Hezbollah, which would be a disaster. It is a major catastrophe. What we are seeing in Gaza would be a Boy Scout event. So I think that it is important to get what remains of the hostages, to stop a war that is going nowhere. These kind of wars are not winnable. The era of glorious victories is over. For the Russians in Ukraine, for the West in the war on terror. Look how the Taliban is back in Afghanistan. So I think that this is the major tank maneuvers of the past in Al Alamein or in the Sinai Desert between Israel and Egypt. These kind of wars are over. In the asymmetrical wars of today, where the enemy, according to David Petraeus, the American general, Gaza, he said, is Mosul, Bakuba, and he mentioned 4 places in Iraq taken together. So I think these wars are not winnable. There is an article I wrote in Haaretz in the first or second month of the war, where I say more or less what I'm saying now. Israel has been drawn into a war, into a just war, but one that doesn't have a finality, a point when you say we got all our objectives, because of the nature of the scenario where the war is taking place.
Thank you. That was my last question. Thank you very much, Mr. Ben-Ami. Okay, back to Gabriela.
Thank you so much, David. I know you had other questions, but we also have lots from the audience, so we'll move into those. Okay, and you know, always it's a real mishmash of questions, so we kind of have to jump around. So one from Francesca Broder-Lawton: do you truly believe the Arabs in Palestine wish to live alongside the Israelis? I think you've partially answered that question, but because it's such a complex one, please give your thoughts.
Well, I think that when you say the Arabs, this is a sort of generalization. I believe there are those who are sincere in their belief of the two-state solution, that are Palestinians who believes that this is what needs to be done. But there are many others who think that the solution is a one-state reality. The younger Palestinian generation, according to all polls and surveys that we know about, Khalil Shkaki is the best pollster, is a Palestinian pollster that has conducted many studies of Palestinian opinion. The younger generation is opposed to the two-state idea. They have given up on the two-state idea, and they believe that we should go for a one-state reality. The end of occupation is more important than statehood. This is the position of the younger generation. So yes, one can say that they want it. I only don't believe that this is possible, because what was not possible in Cyprus and was not possible in Yugoslavia and I don't know about Belgium. I think that won't be possible here. I mean, because of the two egocentric nationalisms coexisting in one common state. I have my doubts, but this is my answer. The majority of the younger generation want to live in a one-state reality with the Israelis.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to a question that is somewhat, well, not entirely related, but and this comes from John Allen. Could you talk about two final status issues about that came through negotiations, the refugees and Jerusalem? Is there any possibility of a solution on either?
I think that Jerusalem is simpler than refugees. I think that on Jerusalem we had, in fact, a solution at the tip of our fingers. I mean, the formula that was proposed on Jerusalem was a partition of the city, not along geographical lines, but along ethnic lines. What is Jewish should be Israeli, and what is Arab should be Palestinian. That was the formula that appears in the Clinton peace parameters. And when it comes to the holy quarters, the holy sites of Jerusalem, this is where we couldn't find the formula, but according to the Palestinians themselves, that was because of Arafat personally. He had the obsession with the Temple Mount, but that others could find a solution. For example, offering to the Palestinians a status of custodians of the holy sites of Islam. Yes, custodians like the Saudis they have in Mecca. They are the custodians. The term sovereignty is not used, but the term custodianship can be used. So there are different formulas. Ehud Olmert, when he was prime minister, proposed the internationalization of the old city of Jerusalem. That was quite a bold, innovative move that was also turned down by the Palestinians. But anyway, solutions can be found on the question of Jerusalem, in my view. When it comes to refugees, you have here the problem of a national movement that wants to create a state, but wants to gather its exiles in a neighboring state. And that's a problem. The Palestinians would have to accept that if we are talking about a two-state solution, that the ingathering of the Palestinian exiles will happen in Palestine, in the state of Palestine, and not in the state of Israel. You know, I can tell you, just to show how uninformed or misinformed are people about the conflict. If you want to understand why the 11% Arabs that lived in Israel in 1948 are now 21%, in spite of the fact that during these 75 years, we got millions of Jewish immigrants coming to the state of Israel, and yet the Arab population has increased to 21%. This is because a return of refugees has been happening all the time from the West Bank, in projects of reunification of families. Lots of Palestinian families in Israel, in the state of Israel, are mixed marriages with families or couples from the West Bank and other parts of Palestine. So I think that there has been hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, many of them Bedouins. The Bedouin community has been very open to this kind of marriages with the Bedouin community in Israel, who are citizens of Israel that married Palestinians. And this has brought to Israel since 1948 to today hundreds of thousands of returnees, as it were. So I think that, and not to speak of East Jerusalem, Israel has annexed East Jerusalem, and by annexing East Jerusalem, it has annexed 300,000 Palestinians. So to ask now, as some Palestinian would-be negotiators ask, to address the right of return, a right of return that has already been happening all these years, is something that no Israeli government would accept today.
Okay, I think that, yeah, it's an interesting point. There are a couple of questions that are related, so I'm going to put the two of them together. One from Elizabeth Block. This goes back to Gaza. If Israel withdraws from the West Bank, would it still control it as it did after it withdrew from its settlers from Gaza? And someone, Shoshona Silber says, you said Gaza had independence, but Israel kept it under siege. So how do you what would happen in the West Bank, and you know, was Gaza truly independent?
It could be independent. When Israel withdrew, it didn't impose immediately a siege on Gaza. Why Israel didn't impose a siege on the West Bank? Because in the West Bank, you didn't have that same kind of attitude that you have in Gaza, where Hamas took over. They won presumably the elections, and then they expelled the Fatah, the PLO elements from Gaza, and started a policy of confrontation with Israel. This is why Israel has had to impose a siege. And again, you know, even this was probably one of the less effective sieges ever in history. If there was such a siege, how does one explain this monstrous military machine that Hamas has built? Where did it come from? One would assume that the same tunnels that brought in these military capabilities could have brought in bread and butter and fill the supermarkets and the mini markets in Gaza. Why it didn't happen? What kind of a siege is this, where they declare a war on Israel, and Israel is supposed to what to do exactly? Israel has to respond, and one way to respond is to try and minimize the capacity of Hamas to rearm itself through a siege. But there has never been a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Today, the humanitarian condition is appalling because of the war. But during the years of siege, these guys have a system of tunnels from Egypt, okay, that is double the length of the London Underground. This is what you have there, and through these tunnels you had everything coming into Gaza. So it was in effect, the siege was ineffective, among other reasons, because of the complicity of the Egyptian authorities with Hamas, either through bribes that Hamas would pay to the Egyptian police in the border. But the fact is that today Israel has displayed its military along the border with Egypt in order to seize this flow of weapons from Egyptian territory into Israel by controlling the area in which the tunnels that come from Egypt get into Gaza. So the siege first was ineffective. It only created bad PR for Israel, but it didn't affect real life in Gaza. The multi-billion budgets that were given by Qatar and other Hamas facilitators, instead of buying butter and bread and butter, they bought missiles and military capabilities.
I have to here ask a follow-up question of my own, because many people say that Netanyahu allowed Hamas to get stronger and get money for arms and so on. How much is it the Israeli is Israel's own fault that Hamas became as strong as it did?
That's right. I think that's the major accusation that is being made against Netanyahu, and he has been on record. I mean, he said it publicly many times that strengthening Hamas is good for preventing a two-state solution. And he downgraded the links between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. And he boosted beefed up the capabilities of Hamas, because he believed this is the best way to prevent a political solution. And this is the concept now. The debate these days in Israel is about the concept that brought upon us and upon the Palestinians this tragedy of the Gaza war. And that was precisely this, the fact that Netanyahu strategically believed that you need to weaken the Palestinian Authority, which is which represents the political option, and strengthen Hamas that doesn't represent a political option. This was his way of killing in a political solution, and created a three-state reality, as it were. You know, the state of Israel with its settlements in the West Bank, Gaza as a state of sorts, yes. What does a state need? They have a government, they had elections, they have a political party which is one party rule, they have military capabilities, they have their finances, they have the international allies with Hezbollah, with Iran, with Turkey, with Qatar. This is an independent state. Maybe not fully, maybe not formally, but yes, sort of independent Palestinian state. So why not impose a siege, however foolish the siege might have been, against an enemy state that is contiguous to your land? Therefore, I think that Hamas has tricked and fooled Israel, both tactically and strategically. Tactically, they managed to create this surprise, and strategically, they stopped the the changing of paradigms in the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. Let me explain. The Abraham Peace Accords were a major strategic setback for the Palestinians, because before the Abraham Peace Accords, the guiding principle of peacemaking in the region was that peace with the Palestinians is the introduction to a possible peace with the Arab world. Without peace with the Palestinians, we are not going to have peace with the Arab world. The Abraham Peace Accords changed the paradigm. They turned on its head the previous paradigm, since we have peace with the Arab world without having peace with the Palestinians. This was the major strategic achievement of this war. This was the major strategic defeat of Israel in this war. This was the major strategic defeat of Netanyahu, who put all his bets on Hamas. Hamas now says to the Arab world and to the international community, no, first Palestine. I blocked your normalization with the Saudis. I blocked your normalization with other Arab states. So that's a major change that is a defeat for those who believed, like Netanyahu and Trump, that now the Arab-Israeli conflict has been solved, and we'll see, we'll find something with the Palestinians, some sort of a solution. But now we need to go back to square one and see what kind of solution we can find for the Palestinians before we have that normalization that the Palestinians, Hamas and PLO as well, could not accept, because it sidelined the Palestinian problem.
So that, right. Here's a question about the actual conditions in Gaza. And this is, well, it's an anonymous question. Do you think the Israeli government is currently trying to starve the civilian population of Gaza and prevent hospitals from providing medical care to the civilian population? In other words, to impose collective punishment. I guess it's, you know, I think the question is, or the direction is, we know that there's terrible hardship in Gaza. Is it an intentional strategy of the Israeli government?
It started as such. I think it started as such. I remember in the first days of the war, I was in a meeting with there is an organization called the Elders that was created by Nelson Mandela, former heads of state. Today, Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, is the chair of the organization. They invited me, and we had a talk in London, and she was appalled by, I remember, and I confirmed that indeed this was what Minister Gallant said in the early days of the war, the defense minister. He did say that Israel should not allow now anything to go into Gaza. No food, no medicine, no water. And this was an initial intention. And some of the experts, of the military experts, among them perhaps one of the most outspoken of them, Giora Island used to come on TV shows and public events, etc., to propose putting pressure on Hamas, defeating Hamas through that kind of policy. And I am happy that this did not prosper, really. and that at some point Israel was forced to change this attitude under American pressure. And today the problem is the fact that Hamas takes over much of this aid that goes into Gaza, distributes the aid that comes into Gaza. And this is one way that Hamas asserts its authority. And this is, again, another defeat, I should say, of Netanyahu's attitude to the war, because you defeat Hamas tactically in battles, but if you do not display, if you do not put in place an alternative authority, one that is not Hamas, be it the Palestinian Authority from the West Bank, be it a sort of regional consortium of Arab powers, whatever, what would happen is that Hamas will maintain its authority. It might be defeated militarily, but it wins politically. So the problem today, again, is that there is no alternative Palestinian authority in Gaza to distribute the hundreds of, or the food that comes in hundreds of lorries every day into Gaza. Today, the capacity of Israel to go back to the initial attitude of using food or weaponizing food, as indeed Minister Gallant did say that at the beginning. But thankfully, American pressure changed this, and today this is not the official policy. There might be technical problems here and there, but this is not a policy anymore.
Thank you. So here's a question. What do you think of the unilateral recognition of a Palestinian state? And maybe you could expand on that, and just obviously that unilateral recognition is being done in order to put pressure on Israel to change its course. And what other, do you feel there should be other kinds of pressure, and what kind, if so, what kind?
Well, it's symbolic more than anything, this recognition. I mean, it doesn't change reality on the ground. And yes, it is a kind of political diplomatic pressure. And if the entire European Union joins these three countries, it would be a major setback for Israel. So I think that the sooner we start some kind of political negotiation with the Palestinians, the better. You know, the problem with and of course the current Israeli government is not in a position. Rule number one is getting rid of this government, and so long as this getting rid democratically, obviously through early elections or in any other kind of political legitimate pressure, because with this government we go nowhere. I mean, that's rule number one. This is not a government that will negotiate any kind of political deal. The Ben-Gvirs and Smotriches are not for negotiations. So this is, first, Israel needs to put its house in order. And also the Palestinians need to put their house in order. We see who is the Palestinian partner, really. Is it the current PLO? Biden said a revitalized Palestinian Authority. Okay, let us see how this revitalized Palestinian Authority comes to be. So anyway, I think that the political pressure is important. I think it shows that the world or the civilized world doesn't want to see Israel's occupation to persist. But so long as this government is here, and if tomorrow, after November, you have in the United States a Trump government, so it would be even more difficult to reach an understanding with the Palestinians, in my view, because you won't see this kind of benign vision that Biden has, which I wish Israel had a government that could go along with Biden to implement his vision of negotiations, a two-state solution, normalization, etc., etc. But as I said, if Israel doesn't change its political configuration, it will be very difficult to go beyond an end to the war, which is in itself a major achievement. But to go from an end to the war to a Palestinian state, this will be a long and tortuous march, which my experience is that it's extremely difficult to get that happening into a two-state reality along the 1967 borders, as these three European states maintain. Okay, they say borders of 1967, etc. I wish this could happen. I am all for it, but one needs to see reality in its complexity.
Okay, I think we have time for one more quick question, but before you answer it, I just want to remind our audience that Canadian Friends of Peace Now, which supports Peace Now in Israel, relies on your donations. So if you feel moved to give us a donation of any kind, please go to our website, peacenowcanada.org, and click on the donate page. Thank you. So the last question is about settlements in the West Bank. Can they be dismantled? And is there space within Israel's borders? Well, I guess the main thing is, can they be dismantled considering all the challenges, and what would happen?
You see, for the dismantling of settlements, they are important. It's important to dismantle them if we want to reach some kind of settlement in the West Bank, either unilateral or bilateral, let alone bilateral. You need to dismantle settlements. The problem is that today most of the settlements are, as I said, adjacent to the Green Line. Most of the settlers, in fact, 30% of the population of the Jewish population in the West Bank are Haredi settlers in two villages, two townships. One is Modi'in Eilit, another is Beitar Eilit. They are both on the border. And this is more or less 30% of the... And then you have what I call real estate settlers, not ideological settlers, but settlers who came because land is cheaper and you could have a little cottage with your own garden in the West Bank at half the price that you get it in Israel proper. So I think these are the easier to move because it is a question of money. It's just about paying compensations and moving them into settlements, into blocks of settlements close to the Green Line. Okay, this won't require more than 4% annexation by Israel in a two-state solution settlement, not more than 4% of the West Bank. And then but then you will have the hardcore, which is the ideological clusters of settlements of the Ben-Gvir, Smotrich brand, okay? These are such that would be extremely difficult to remove. These are those who would take a civil war to dismantle. Those of us who follow the funerals of the fallen in the war in Gaza would see that more and more of the fallen soldiers come from settlements in the West Bank. This is a reflection of the sociological changes that occurred in Israel. In years past, the list of the fallen would come from kibbutzim of the left. Today, they mostly come from settlements and from Israel's, let us call it for the sake of discussion, Israel's periphery, not the traditional elite, as it were. So this is a change that has political ramifications, political implications, and therefore it strengthens the grip of this of the settler movement on Israeli politics. We have paid with our blood, they will tell you, for this victory or for whatever we achieved in Gaza. This is a major change that poses another problem to the two-state solution. Now, removing these hotbeds of fanaticism and radicalism in Hebron, Kiryat Arba, and Itamar, we speak more or less about 100,000 people. This will take a civil war by force. I mean, unless they want to live under Palestinian sovereignty in a Palestinian state. I can't imagine Smotrich living under Palestinians or the Smotriches of the West Bank living under Palestinian sovereignty. This would require Israel to have a leader, if we are going to face that kind of challenge, a leader like, say, Ariel Sharon, a brutal leader with benign intentions. Because good guys, Moshe Dayan used to say, Gantz is a fine man, General Gantz in the government. But this is the kind of guy about whom Moshe Dayan used to say he is a good guy in the negative sense of the expression. But Sharon was a bad guy in the good sense of the expression when he decided to be the only leader ever to dismantle settlements. And I can assure you that after he dismantled 8,000 settlers from Gaza, and he dismantled cemeteries as well that needed to be moved to Israel proper, I can assure you that Ariel Sharon, that night, he slept like a baby. He didn't have any remorse. When in 1994, Dr. Goldstein was his name, in Hebron, entered the mosque and assassinated cold-bloodedly. How many? 20, 30 faithful that were praying. That was a golden opportunity for Yitzhak Rabin, who was then the prime minister, to dismantle. There was the national mood was in favor. to dismantle the settlement in Hebron. He thought about it, but didn't have the guts to do it. So this is our dilemma. How do you get rid of the real estate settlements? It's only a question of money. But with the ideological settlements, it calls for a confrontation that only the unique kind of leader that appears from time to time, but we don't have it now, that will be ready to confront reality, see it in all its cruelty, and take bold decisions and face the consequences. This kind of leaders Israel does not have today. It has 100% politician like Netanyahu, for whom political survival is the only thing that matters. We assume that in a democracy, leaders have a vision. And in order to implement their vision, carry out, make their dreams a reality, they build a coalition that allows them to implement their vision. With Netanyahu, it's the other way around. He defines his vision according to the coalition that he is capable of forming. And this is what you have there. In 2014, Netanyahu offered Abbas peace based on the border of 1967. I asked the Palestinian chief negotiator at the time, one of the most brilliant minds that I ever met, Hussein Aga. He lives in London, and he was the chief Palestinian negotiator. I asked him, how do you explain that Netanyahu agreed to the borders of 1967? He said, very easy. He knew that whatever he accepts, Abbas will not accept. So it was a tactical move. In the current government, Netanyahu is not even allowed to make a tactical move. Try to outwit, outsmart your interlocutor, because he would be toppled by his allies in the coalition. And this is something that every peacemaker needs to understand. And the stability, the political stability of your opponent is vital for your objectives. If you want to reach an agreement, you need that your interlocutor has a political standing. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything. But the Palestinians have excelled in destroying the political stability of their Israeli interlocutors by pushing and pushing and pushing, saying, okay, no, this is not enough. Another kvetch, another kvetch, another kvetch. This destroyed Rabin, destroyed Barak, and destroyed Olmert. And we came to a situation where we have an opportunist in power that doesn't want to negotiate. But those of us who wanted to negotiate were destroyed politically by the Palestinians. And therefore they are now facing these guys. I remember saying it in person to Arafat. You are opening the gates to the rise of the hawks in Israel. And you open the gates for the rise of two kinds of hawks, the Israeli hawks and the Palestinian hawks, which is what we have today. Hamas facing Netanyahu's government.
Well, it's quite an analysis. We have a lot more questions, and I have questions and things I want to say back to you, but we are running out of time. So I just want to thank you so much for this very interesting, stimulating, challenging discussion. I think there are probably people who are troubled by some of your answers, but you're forcing us to see things in a different way, and that's a testimony to your deep knowledge of the subject and your understanding of the many complexities. And I guess we have to try to understand the richness of the problems as well. So thank you, Mr. Ben-Ami, very much for your participation. Thank you, David, for your moderating, and thank you to the audience for being here. And stay tuned for further webinars. And Mr. Ben-Ami, there are questions and long comments as well. I will send them to you, so you can't respond to them all, but you might be interested in seeing what people have to say, and that's one way. So I can only wish you well and wish Israel and the Palestinians better days. That's good. And we can only try to do our little bit in order to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ben-Ami.
Okay, bye, shalom.